Hi Year 9. Thanks for all the feedback last week after Tuesday's lesson when I asked you to comment on how you coped with those 4 different introductory sections. So I'm going to try and respond to that this week. The majority of you felt comfortable with the whole top-heavy fractions mixed number thing, but some of you didn't. So what I thought I'd do is we'd do a couple of starters on it this week and then move on to something else from fractions. So just a quick reminder, we call this a top-heavy, sometimes referred to rather pompously as an improper fraction, and this is a mixed number because it's got a whole number bit and a fraction bit. So I always think about my cake shop. If I'm selling my cakes in halves and someone comes in and buys 5 of them, how many whole cakes can they make? So you need to remember that you need 2 halves to make a whole, and so you've got 2.5. So just as a starter, see if you can tell me what these 6 are as mixed numbers. Sorry, I'm quite good at maths, but my alphabet isn't very good. That should be a D. So pause now, have a go at those 6 for me. Okay, so with quarters, I need 4 of them to make a whole one. So here I've got 1 whole one with 3 quarters left over. Still with quarters here, so I've got enough for 2 whole cakes here, haven't I? That would be 8 quarters. And so that again, I've got 3 left over, so that's 2 and 3 quarters. If I'm dealing with thirds, I need 3 of them to make a whole cake, so I've got enough for 2 whole cakes here, that would be 6 thirds, and then 1 left over. I'm going to stop the pictures now. I can't really draw fifths very easily, but hopefully you can see you need 5 of them to make a whole one. I've got enough for 2 whole cakes here with 3 bits left over. Back to halves here, so I've got 5 halves here, so if I add another couple to take me to 7, that's 3.5. And 9 fifths, that's not enough for 2 whole cakes. I've got 1 whole cake and 4 fifths left over. Drop me an email if that's all a bit fuzzy. But what we'll do in tomorrow's starter is we'll work the other way around. So I'll give you some mixed numbers and ask you to write them as top-heavy fractions. Right, let's get on with the rest of the lesson. This whole idea about fractions, percentages, decimals, there were several people who just felt like they needed a bit more practice. Some of you I know find this easy, so what I've tried to do this lesson is cover the basics, but also at the end include something a bit more challenging, so hopefully everyone will find something helpful and engaging. So converting fractions to percentages, I've got 3 options here. Firstly, if you've got a fraction with the denominators already 100, well, there's no thought involved there at all, is it? We know percentage means out of 100, so that's straight off nice and easy. If we can easily divide the denominator to make 100, then that's also going to be easy, isn't it? So in this case, I've halved the denominator, so I need to halve the numerator as well. So that's 12%. And similarly, if I can multiply the denominator to make 100, so 20 times 5 is 100, I can convert it easily. All I need to do is to multiply the top by the same thing. Multiply the bottom by 5, so I multiply the top by 5, so it becomes 5 over 100, which is 5%. Okay, so here are a few for you to try. So press pause, see if you can change those fractions to percentages by firstly writing them with a denominator of 100. Press pause, have a go. Okay, so hopefully you were able to do those. Multiplied by 5, top and bottom here. Numerator and denominator both doubled here. Multiplied by 10 here. I had to pause at this point because it's quite a fiddly one. So 25 times 4 is 100. 24 times 4, I doubled it and doubled it again, gives me 96. Had to divide by 4. 6 divided by 4 is 9. Had to multiply by 4. Had to multiply by 5. Well, that's all very well, but I can well imagine you saying, okay, but that's only going to work for certain fractions, isn't it? Fractions with nice easy denominators like 20 or 10 or 400. What about some more fiddly ones? Well, there are some where you can do it using 2 jumps. So, for example, 12 out of 30, I can't multiply 30 easily to make 100, certainly not with a whole number. But if I firstly change the denominator to 10, so to change 30 into 10 I need to divide by 3, so I'm going to do the same to the top. 12 divided by 3 is 4, so I've divided numerator and denominator by 3. Then, to turn 10 into 100, I multiply by 10, so I do the same to the top. And so I get there in 2 jumps. Let's do one more together. 75, you can't multiply 75 straight up to make 100, but if you divide by, well again it's 3, it's not always 3, but in this case it is, divide by 3, 75 divided by 3 is 25, so that's 30 divided by 3, which is 10. 25 into 100 I need to multiply by 4, so 10 times by 4 as well, gives me 40%. So go on, press pause and have a go at those last 4. So here, couldn't get from 40 to 100, so I halved it first, and then multiplied by 5, half multiplied by 5. Whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. 80 divided by 4, multiplied by 5, 36 divided by 4, multiplied by 5, 45%. Actually, I think this was a silly one to include, because you can get from 5 to 100, you multiply by 20. But this particular exercise did it by doubling first and then multiplying by 10. Double first, multiply by 10, 80%. 150, divide it by 3 and then double it, divide it by 3 and then double it, 24%. Now you still might be thinking, well actually that's still only going to work for certain fractions, and you're right, you're absolutely right. There are some fractions which are almost impossible to convert to percentages using this method, and what we do is we go via decimals. We convert them to decimals first and then on to percentages, and that's for another lesson. However, there are some that we can work out using facts that we already know. So I'm sort of hoping that you know that a half is 50%. And if you take a half of a pizza and cut it in half, you get quarters. So I hope you already know that a quarter is 25%. But I'm going to keep going. What about if I cut a quarter in half? So here's half a pizza. Cut it in half, you get a quarter. What if you cut that in half? What do we call that fraction? Hopefully you can see it's 1/8. And if I cut that in half, that would give me 1/16. Now, half of a quarter is 1/8, so that's going to be 12.5%. And 1/16 is half of an eighth, so it's going to be half of that. So there are some fractions which we can sort of base on what we know about other fractions. And there's a couple of special cases, so I might even put a little cheeky subheading in my notes. That, because these two fractions are particularly troublesome. But if you take 100 and divide it by 3, you get 33.3 recurring. So hopefully you remember that, and that's 66.6 recurring. Now it's certainly worth having a note of that, because this next exercise requires you to use that. I'd also make a note of this. We don't use it in the next exercise, but that's certainly worth remembering. Okay, so try this one. I'm hoping that you can tell me what 1/10 is as a percentage straight off. So using what we did a moment ago, see if you can tell me what 1/20th, which is half of 1/10, and 1/40th, which is half of 1/20th, are as percentages. And what about 1/5? This is a bit tricky, this one, but see how you get on. Okay, so 1/10 is 10%, and that's one of those facts that I'm sort of pretty confident you will have remembered. So 1/20th, which is half of this, that's going to be 5%. And 1/40th, that's going to be 2.5%. Now 1/5, were you able to see that? 1/5 is twice as big as 1/10 because 2/10 simplifies to 1/5, doesn't it? So if you cut a pizza into 10 and a separate pizza into 5, these pieces are twice as big. So that is 20%. Of course, we could have used the other method where we multiply or divide to make a denominator of 100 with these, but it might be that this is a quicker way of doing it. Okay, so in the final exercise, I'm going to demo one, and then you've got one to try for yourself. I'm going to take a square and break it up into different sections. So I've taken a square and broken it into different sections. I'm going to work out what fraction of the whole square each section is, and I'm going to write those fractions as percentages as well. So hopefully you can see that this is a quarter of the square. I've started by breaking it into 4. So this is a quarter, and I know a quarter is 25%. Here I've got another quarter split in half. So hopefully you can see that that's an eighth. And an eighth, as a percentage, we just said a moment ago, was 12.5%. Are there any other eighths in that picture? Well, I hope you can recognise that this is an eighth, isn't it? Because it's another quarter cut in half, in a different way to this one, but that's still an eighth. This is also an eighth altogether, but we've split it in half. So that is 1/16, and that's 6.25%. We just said that a moment ago. And similarly, that's 1/16, that's 1/16, and that's 1/16. So you could split the square up into 16 pieces that size, equals pieces that size, or 16 equal pieces that size. Is it surprising that that has the same area as that? Don't know. What about down here? Well, if I draw another line, I'll use a different colour, but if I draw another line there, so having drawn that line in, can we see that this is another eighth, so that's a 16th. So what's this bit here? Well, it's a whole quarter minus a 16th. So what fraction is that? Well, this is one of the things we still need to do, but if I, sorry, not 1/14, 1/4. If I go for common denominator, like we were doing when we were comparing fractions, I can write both of those with a denominator of 16. So 4 4s are 16, so that's 3/16. And as a percentage, it's 25%, take away 6.25%, which is 18.75%. Okay, I don't know if you followed that. Maybe it's worth pausing or rewinding and going through that again. But your challenge is to do exactly the same for this diagram. And I've included a handout with this on if you wanted to draw on it. But if you haven't got a printer, that's fine. You can just look at it on the screen. I don't need you to copy the picture if you haven't got a copy of it. All I'd like you to say is write A equals, I'd like you to write it as a fraction and as a percentage, and do the same for B, C, D, E and F. Now, it might help you to have a copy of it, so you can perhaps draw some extra lines on. That was certainly helpful for me here, but I think that's quite a challenging little problem. Let me just firstly say, if you haven't got a ruler, that line does cut it in half, and that line is halfway down as well, so I'll tell you that much. But that's it for today. I think that's quite a challenging problem, so I think that's going to take you a while. And as always, I'd like you to submit your answer. So it might be that you have printed it out and you can send me a photo. It might be that you're not able to do that, so you could just send me the A equals, B equals, C equals. Remember, I'd like each of them as a fraction and as a percentage. Okay, good stuff. Take care.